Moving forward, I'd now like to invite on stage Dr. Nandita Chatterjee, Secretary, Ministry of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation, Government of India, an IAS who's been a career civil servant for the last 36 years. During this tenure, she has served at the level of a state cadre with the Government of India and with international organizations. Let us put our hands together for Dr. Chatterjee.
Put it on the slideshow, please. Respected delegates, ladies and gentlemen, friends, it's very relevant that Economic Times and the National Housing Bank has organized this very crucial summit on housing finance, and particularly at a time when the demand for affordable housing is being articulated. And also, suppliers are looking for opportunities as how to realize this vision of housing for all. Given that the summit will deliberate on policy development, product innovation, as well as dynamics of housing finance, I have selected a theme which is entitled as Emerging Trends and Dynamics in the Housing Finance Industry. This importance of the housing sector and its multiplier effects has already been highlighted in the welcome speech, but I would like to focus on it a little more, just to make you all realize or make all of us understand how important is the growth of this sector of the economy, GDP, and the government as a whole. The housing has very strong multiplier effects, linkages with 250 industries, as already my predecessor speaker had said, and it accounts for 11.39% of total output of the economy, 8.2% of GDP, 11.52% of employment. And in terms of employment generation, this sector is only next to the agriculture sector. Let's look at the various parameters in economics. It's highly labor intensive. The output ratio is 2.34, and if you invest $1,400 US, you generate 2.69 jobs. The primary sector has a backward linkage with raw materials, the service sector with skilled labor, design engineering, banking and finance, and we are going to talk about finance in great detail today. Fiscal impacts, we have thrice income multiplier effects, generates 12% in terms of indirect taxes, and of course manufacturing of construction material. Now the policies and incentives that have been rolled out so far are in three categories. One is Government of India and state policies and programs. Other is development control regulations and relaxations. And then of course you have the state level tax and charges exemptions. Priority sector lending, housing loans up to 35 lakhs are considered in this category. Income tax exemptions and interest on principal on home loans. We heard the two predecessor speakers, and also we are aware, all of us have been following the budget of 16-17 very, very keenly. A lot of emphasis, a lot of fillip has been given on the housing sector. And this is perhaps one of the years where there has been a whole lot of encouragement, fiscally speaking, that has been given to the sector. We have the Credit Guarantee Fund for covering lending to low-income housing. The National Housing Bank, you just heard the CMD speak. They refinance schemes for banks and financial institutions, tax-free bonds, HUDCO and NHB to permit them to raise finances at low cost, tax breaks, exemptions for developers under service and income tax. There was a reference made by the CMD and NHB just now on the harmonized list and infrastructural status. If you all have realized from this year's budget, actually all those who are going to invest in affordable housing in the next 3 years are actually going to get a break from the taxes on profit. So we have actually got that benefit of infrastructural status, though as a declaration in the budget. We have, of course, the external commercial borrowings allowed for affordable housing projects, and FDI has been relaxed considerably under automatic route for construction and development sector. Now, this, of course, is almost, stating the obvious in front of an august audience which has all finances, but let's just get back and recapitulate. What are the different housing finance avenues which are available? Okay, you have your own savings, you borrow from your friends, relatives, or informal lenders. You take the more preferred approach of scheduled commercial banks. You go to NBFCs or MFIs, housing finance companies, cooperative banks, regional rural banks, agriculture rural development banks, and cooperative housing finance societies. And of course, developers and individuals. They also have developers of avenues such as investors, FDI, ECB, etc. Now let's look at the current housing finance market. I'm sure NHB will, and the other speakers will have a lot more to speak on this, but let me just briefly touch on the topic. Housing loans form a significant portion of personal loans and overall gross bank credit. Now, what is the share of housing loans and gross bank credit? As a percentage, it's 11.7% to personal housing loans and around 3% for commercial real estate, which also includes commercial residential housing or large housing projects. Share of banks and housing finance is surprisingly declining. In 2006, it was 75% of market share, and if looking at the 2016 estimates of NHB, it's currently around 60%. Coming at the priority sector housing loans and the general housing loans, housing is about 45% of PSL and 55% of the general. Now let's look at the HFCs. I've just talked about the banks. HFCs, obviously, their main mandate is housing finance. So they cater predominantly to housing loans. Of the housing loan portfolio, the data we have, of course, from NHB again, 80% is to individuals, 16% to builders, and 4% to other corporate bodies. What are the source of funds? Own funds, non-convertible debentures, foreign investments, FDI, ECB, commercial papers, cash certificates, refinancing like by NHB, securitization, public deposits mainly for banks, and long-term infrastructure bonds introduced in the Union Budget of 2014. Now, I've distinguished between the large HFCs and the smaller HFCs for obvious reasons. Large HFCs have significant access to capital markets, and the cost of own lending is more or less at par with banks, because they are able to access through commercial paper, refinance, deposits, bank borrowings, bonds, and so on. But the smaller ones who rely mostly on bank borrowings and NHB refinance, their own lending, as you would all understand, would become much more costlier. Also, the reach is a significant issue in this. Trends of credit flow to housing sector, again, I have borrowed from NHB, but if you see, it's a disturbing trend, particularly if I look at the affordable housing sector. If we look at these little concentric circles, which are moving from 2012-13 to 2015-16, you will see that the loans up to 2 lakh has gone down from 2 to 1%, to 5 lakhs from 12 to 5%, and up to 10 lakhs it's gone down from 22 to 16%. So although housing loans as such has not done too badly, it's more the big ticket housing loans which have become more popular with the banks, but as far as the small ticket ones are there, this is losing gradually their attraction. Now I come back to the situation which I think the CMD NHB introduced, but I would like to speak on this in detail because this has been the initiative of the Government of India. This Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana was launched in June 2015, and while dedicating it to the nation, the Honorable Prime Minister said that we dream of an India where by 2022, nobody should be there who doesn't have a roof over his head. Sabka ho sapna, ek ghar ho apna. So we introduced this Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which is also popularly known as the Housing for All Urban Mission. And we introduced this with 4 distinct components. One was slum redevelopment, which could be of 2 ways. One is in situ or relocated. Now here we were encouraging developers through extra FSI, TDR, FAR if required. For every unit that got rehabilitated, 1 lakh would come as a subsidy from Government of India. Affordable housing and partnership was the third vertical, where we said that the state parastatals, urban local bodies, any government authority in the state dealing with housing or whose business, rules of business permitted housing could have a partnership either with a public sector or with a private sector entity to do affordable housing projects. Now this was quite attractive because we said that only 35% would be for the EWS category. And by economically weaker sections, we talked about people whose income would be, annual income would be up to rupees 3 lakhs. The rest of the land, and we were presuming and we were hoping that the land would be made available by the government. So what is the attraction for the developer? The balance 65% of the land, the developer could develop as he wished, of course, with the permission of the parastatal or the state government entity, whichever was supposed to be his partner. But even for those 35% that he would take up for economically weaker section, the government of India would give a subsidy of 1.5 lakhs. We had the fourth vertical of beneficiary-led construction or enhancement, which basically meant if you are an individual who which could be a family of husband, wife, and unmarried children, who doesn't have a pakka house anywhere in India, you could construct your house, you could renovate your house, or you could enhance your house. For this, Government of India gives 1.5 lakhs per unit. But I want to share with you here that till now, we have already accepted funding for nearly 9 lakh houses. And of those 9 lakh houses, state governments have also started contributing. For example, an average cost of house, say in Gujarat, is 6 lakhs. So Government of India gives 1.5 lakhs, Gujarat state government gives 1.5 lakhs, and the balance is put in by the beneficiary. So ideally, it's a win-win situation because the state government and the Government of India contribution is a grant. And the best part of this is that you don't have to build completely a new house. You have a house, say it is 20 square meter. You add a room of 9 square meter, or maybe you add a room and you have a toilet or something with it. And you get grant up to 1.5 lakhs to enhance your house. And if any of you have analyzed the reasons for housing shortage, 82% of the housing shortage is because of congestion. It's not because people don't actually have a house in urban India, or they don't have a house in rural India, but too many people live in a room or so. Now I come to the most important vertical, which is directly linked with housing finance, and housing finance by banks and other PLIs like HFCs. This is, I think the CMD NHB introduced it, but allow me to speak to you in detail. It's called the credit-linked subsidy, and as CMD jokingly said, it is true. For the first time in this country, the government is actually placing upfront a credit subsidy subvention of 6.5%, which basically means if you have an EMI of 6,000 odd, it actually becomes payable as 4,000 odd. Now the banks should be happy because that amount is upfront, it goes to the loan account of the beneficiary, and self-certifications are also being accepted, which means the beneficiary doesn't have to go around and get a certificate from the urban local body or what have you. Of course, the banks have to do their due diligence, but that's in their DNA. Talking a little further on this, what are the features of CLSS? It's a demand-side intervention on home loans available by the eligible urban poor. Now here, when I say urban poor, I say more than EWS. I'm also bringing in a category of low-income groups. Low-income groups are that category of people whose annual income could be up to 6 lakhs of rupees in India. And in India, you will find a large number of entrants, particularly in the service sector, whose incomes could actually be around 40,000, 45,000, 50,000 per month. These people could actually think of having families, of buying houses, taking advantage of the situation. You heard the government has accepted the 7th Pay Commission recommendations. So which basically means, and if you have studied, if anybody has studied the profile of the composition of the government servants, 62% actually are Group C, which basically means they largely up to the system level are people whose incomes are in the LIG category. Now they'll be given arrears. This is the month in which everybody is getting arrears, ladies and gentlemen. You get the money, so what do? Okay, why don't I think of a house? State Bank has done it. They've already introduced a couple of products piggybacking on this. So now I am asking State Bank that since you are actually taking advantage of this, why don't you put CLSS? So the banks gain, government gains, the beneficiary gains. He takes a loan, say of 10 lakhs. And of that 10 lakhs, for the first 6 lakhs, 2.3 lakhs is picked up by the government. Rest of the 4 lakhs he can pay at the market rate. So eventually, if you have seen that little red sentence which I put on that slide, the interest subsidy being about 2.3 to 2.2 lakhs for a 6 lakh loan, presumably at a rate of 10.5, the reduced EMI is 4,050, coming down from 6,632. And since self-certification is admissible, subsidy is credited upfront, it couldn't get better. Yesterday, in fact, I was having a review meeting in which we discussed this in great detail. And we said, let's target. I have actually shared with National Housing Bank. The way we are doing Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojanas like this, all states are actually assessing the demand. That is, there are only 2 eligibility conditions: husband, wife, unmarried children, or it may not be a married person also, but adult children and married children are not taken to be part of a family. Also, no pakka house anywhere in India. If you fulfill these 2 conditions, you articulate your demand. We have already been able to articulate, now this is very interesting, I thought I'll share it with you in this forum. Already we've been able to assess a demand of 77.2 lakh. Urban residents have articulated their demand for affordable houses. It's a big figure. And of this, about a quarter wants to take a bank loans to acquire a house. Yesterday itself, I have shared some details of beneficiaries who are willing to take bank loan, which have come on our database with the National Housing Bank and the HUDCO, saying these are the willing beneficiaries. Please facilitate them. If they are eligible, if they satisfy the bank's due diligence procedures, by all means. I'm sharing this information so that all of us can realize that the demand for affordable housing has now been enabled. It's been strengthened. It's been facilitated. In fact, I think it was last week when I saw a very interesting article in Economic Times where the caption said that there has been a lot of enablement in demand for affordable housing. And now suppliers are looking at opportunities as how to take advantage of this freshly, newly articulated demand. So here I come and I request you to please take advantage of the situation where we can take our country forward, where we can make everybody realize their dreams by having a pakka house in this country. I continue with CLSS. I have already described the house sizes for economically weaker section is 30 square meter. For low-income groups, it's up to 60 square meter. Preferences, again, we have said manual scavengers, widows, the vulnerable population, minorities, differently abled, transgenders. Please give them preference. They really need shelter, security, empowerment. The 2 central nodal agencies are, of course, the National Housing Bank and HUDCO. The way it works is like this. The Government of India has a budget for CLSS. Of that, depending on the demand from the central nodal agencies, certain amount of funding is released to the central nodal agencies. The central nodal agencies release this money to banks depending on their claims for subsidy, furnishes a utilization certificate to Government of India, takes further money amount. And as the CMD NHB was just telling you, I think 142 crores of subsidy has already been released. I think we are already looking at about a figure of nearly 9,000 beneficiaries who've been sanctioned a loan, and we are looking at much more. And we are too happy to provide further funds to the central nodal agencies to finance this particular vertical. Coming back to the original topic on which I was speaking, let's look at the dynamics and emerging trends in housing finance. What are the emerging trends? Average ticket size of housing is increasing. HFC's role in housing finance is growing. In fact, we did an analysis when we sat with NHB, and we saw that about 80% of the claims were actually coming in from HFCs. So the HFCs are really coming in a very big way. As is the case with NBFCs, albeit for incremental housing or refurbishments. Demand for non-metro cities are increasing. Margin money, of course, being a challenge still because they have to try and find out their own sources of balance, source of finance. The CMD NHB just said PFRDA, EPFO are interested for investing. We have to look at the scope of financing. Then, of course, we look at covered bonds, mortgage-backed securities, reverse mortgage lending, which has been tried, and we look at PSL certificates, which has been, I think, notified in 7th April of this year, whether that could actually act as a game changer. The priority sector lending certificates. Looking at some of the new areas, you would have read that in the governance sector, the Real Estate Regulation and Development Act has been enacted in 2016. Some of the sections have been notified in May 2016. So bringing in governance, regulation, transparency and accountability in the real estate sector. We would try to maybe discuss throughout the day whether new products and offerings are required for the new customer base at the bottom of the pyramid, those who are looking for affordable housing. Do we look at changes in outlook? Do we explore possibilities and changes in outlook and appraisal procedures? Land issues, the CMD NHB has already talked about it. Land tenure, property rights, because ownership is an issue when you do due diligence. Looking at parity in banks, HFCs and NBFCs for housing finance, you can discuss it. Project finance to be made attractive for affordable housing, not retail per se, but project finance as a whole, and whether affordable HFCs could be promoted with certain incentives. Some global international practices, I just quote, development of secondary market for housing assets, some mortgage guarantee companies and covered bonds. These have been globally more or less been accepted. How far we could take it forward in India, I leave you to deliberate and discuss, given most of you are financiers here and you would like to take it further. There were 3-4 issues which I think the CMD NHB just raised while he was speaking. And I think one of them was on rental housing and tenancy. Yes, let me just give you the developments. We had formulated a draft rental housing policy because we strongly feel that rental housing could very effectively complement ownership housing, particularly in urban India. And this is almost, we are about to finalize it, and the process is ongoing. We have also developed a Model Tenancy Act, and we are now talking to the legal counterparts to see how we can formalize it. The basic purpose is to encourage landlords to let out their premises, to encourage tenants to move in without any fear of ad hoc eviction, to have a well-documented process where both are confident, both have a system and an agreement to fall back on, and nobody unnecessarily will need to take legal recourse until and unless there are exceptions. So we are trying to have a framework where both landlords and tenants can have a happily agreed, comfortable relationship. Another discussion came in on single window. I think you all are aware, but let me just once again introduce the issue. In Delhi and Mumbai, there has been considerable progress. There has been online integration of all the clearances required to get construction permit. It's going to be one single form, one single payment gateway, one set of online clearances, and within a very specific time schedule. Our Honorable Minister himself is chairing all the monitoring meetings, and we're reviewing it very, very frequently. not only with the Urban Development Ministry, which is the nodal body for the urban local bodies, but also with Environment and Forests, Culture, Defense, Ministry of Civil Aviation, and Ministry of Consumer Affairs, which are the other stakeholders in the process, because you need clearances from all these bodies. Talking about technology, I think CMD NHB briefly touched upon it. We have, as a part of the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, a technology submission. What we are trying to encourage is that fast-track technology, innovative technology, energy-efficient technology, green technologies are made popular and accessed and utilized. We've gone ahead, we are working with IITs in this. We have a specialized organization called Building Materials Training Promotion Council, which is with our ministry. We also have the Hindustan Prefab Limited, which is with our ministry. We are working on EPS, we are working on monolith, shear wall. We are also doing work on precast, so and GFRG. So there's a lot of work that's going on. There's a technology park which has been set up in the premises of Hindustan Prefab Limited at Jangpura. If you get time, please do take some time to go and have a look at it, where we have done little units using these technologies. We also are working with 7 state governments which have given us land to set up demonstration housing projects. We demonstrate how to use a technology. The engineers, architects, and urban local bodies come and they see how to do it, and they try and take it to scale. So this is very much part, because you will appreciate and understand that if I have to meet this demand of nearly 1 crore to 1.2 crores in 5 years, we need to move very fast. So I hope I've been able to give you certain information on the thinking of the government, the initiatives taken, and of course I would like to thank all of you who have been together with us in this process, and I hope we will get you with us in the coming process. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I wish the seminar and conference all success, and I would like to thank you once again. Have a good day.
Thank you so very much, ma'am, and we thank you and the government for this continuous support towards the dream coming true in 2022. Let us now put our hands together for Ms. Dhar as she steps forward to thank ma'am with a token of our appreciation. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Chatterjee, thank you so very much for your presence, ma'am.